It can be a little unsettling to think about the future in even the most general terms. We live in an uncertain world, with the one constant being change, and we humans tend to like predictability and even repetition, not only in our daily routines but over the long term as well. While the march of progress was certainly pronounced during the industrialization of the 20th century, it's become less of a march and more of a sprint with the advent of the internet age. For just one example, look at the smartphone, a device ubiquitous in everyday life which didn't even exist 12 years ago, and which savvy observers tell us is approaching obsolescence far more quickly than we might think as new technologies begin to take hold. If you find change to be uncomfortable and sometimes scary, then the next 5 decades are going to keep you on your toes. Some of the changes we can look forward to are simply odd, bizarre, or surprising, but some of them are truly unsettling, and they're all nearly certain to happen. For some, this will be a quirky curiosity, and for others, an unthinkable terror. But if climate change continues on its current course, we may very well hit peak coffee before too long. The world's 2 billion cup per day habit is already being squeezed by warmer climates, and there's little in the way of agricultural fixes for the problem. The Arabica blend is by far the world's most popular, comprising fully 70% of all coffee consumption. And unfortunately, it's not a very hardy crop. It requires very specific conditions to grow properly, and rising temperatures and the accompanying heavier rainfall have begun to stunt the growth of crops around the world. Add to this the fact that crop-destroying pests and diseases all thrive in hotter, wetter climates, and you've got a complex problem with no clear solutions. Enjoy that espresso while you can. It may only be a matter of years before it's an unaffordable luxury. Virtual reality has a number of potentially useful applications in the future, but among them is one which many might find a little, well, freaky. Imagine an algorithm which could assemble a reasonably accurate VR representation of a person by gleaning all possible information about them online: photos, videos, social media profiles. It might not be an exact replica, but a sophisticated enough algorithm could produce a pretty close facsimile, from appearance and voice to mannerisms, interests, and personality. Now, imagine the person being replicated by this algorithm is deceased. Futurist and Google Director of Engineering Raymond Kurzweil, who has made dozens of astonishingly accurate predictions over the last several decades, thinks that this will come to pass. While some of us might be comforted at the thought of having some kind of interactions with loved ones after their deaths, for many of us the idea is bound to seem more than a little spooky. For that matter, if you've seen even a single episode of Black Mirror, you probably have chills running down your spine right now. Autonomous vehicles have made huge strides in just the past few years, with tech titans like Google and Apple leading the way in making the technology viable for public deployment. Vehicles manufactured by Tesla come with a self-driving package which is constantly being upgraded via system updates to their onboard computers, and it seems all but certain that we'll be seeing more and more such vehicles on the roads in the years to come. But what will happen when this technology is perfected? Taking into account that the vast majority of deaths and injuries on the road are attributable to human error, the answer is obvious. Cars that require human operators will become obsolete. While this will make our roads exponentially safer, it will still be a little creepy to think about all those millions of cars busily carting their occupants wherever they need to go, with not a single human eye on the road. It might seem outlandish to think that one day we could be hired, fired, and supervised by computers, or that that very computer might determine which occupation we're best suited for. But think of it like this: since the advent of the internet, online dating has absolutely exploded, with many services reporting stellar success rates in matching up clients with their future spouses. If we chose computers to match us up with our life partner, then allowing them to assign us our occupation isn't that much of a stretch. Some data even suggests the latter may be easier than the former. It might not seem terribly creepy now, but wait until the first time you receive a performance evaluation or invitation to a company event which appears to be the work of a genial and personable boss, but which you know is actually the work of the artificial intelligence tasked with supervising your workforce. And if that's not enough to give you the willies, consider that this is only the tip of the AI iceberg. Super intelligent machines becoming as smart or smarter than humans have been a science fiction trope for decades, but the idea is swiftly moving into the realm of reality. British AI company DeepMind, which was purchased by Google in 2014, has already made headlines with an artificial intelligence that teaches itself to play video games and produces unique and, well, rather disturbing pieces of art. But the neural network is only becoming more efficient at learning, and some think it could overtake human intelligence in just a few short years. One of these people is Ian Pearson, a futurist with an accuracy record nearly as impressive as Ray Kurzweil's. He's of the opinion that AI in general, and DeepMind in particular, will probably match human intelligence and cognitive processes by 2025, and perhaps even as early as 2020. This could be an enormously helpful resource if harnessed properly, but if not, it could potentially spell the end of human existence, or at the very least human existence as we know it. Once machines surpass human intelligence, there will be no practical reason not to think of them, and for them to think of themselves as the new dominant force on the planet. In the event that we're able to avoid a Skynet scenario, in which these super intelligent machines decide that human life is a threat to the planet which must be eliminated, we may still find ourselves under the dominion of our own creation as second-class citizens of the Earth. Not only will such machines find it exceedingly easy to fool and manipulate our feeble human brains, they may also become the law, ruling the planet with an almost literal iron fist. Even today, technology known as laws or lethal autonomous weapon systems are in development, armed robots which can be controlled remotely to penetrate dangerous war zones. Their stated purpose is to reduce human casualties and make war more humane, but if they were to one day escape human control and become truly autonomous, it could spell bad news for our cherished freedoms and even our very existence. Of course, the possibility also exists that we may not be so much wiped out by our AI overlords as assimilated by them, like the Borg in Star Trek. Machine-brain interfaces are becoming more advanced with each passing year, and even eccentric billionaire Elon Musk has recently launched a company called Neuralink, which aims to produce a reliable and safe uplink between brain and computer. There are surprisingly few technological barriers to this, with the main obstacle to widespread implementation being government regulation. But this is one instance in which erring on the side of too much regulation may turn out to be a good thing, assuming it's truly for the purposes of safety and efficacy. It's also easy to imagine a world in which the advantage of direct brain uplink to AI is available only to the privileged few who can afford it, leaving the rest of us at the mercy of the cyborgs. Some may find this more fascinating than scary, unless you have an acute fear of heights or a certain variety of claustrophobia. According to Shore Architecture, a forward-thinking design and research institute with an aim to create sustainable future environments, the cities of the future may not be cities at all. Rather, they might be skyscrapers, enormous, towering, self-sustaining structures far taller and more complex than present-day buildings. Such structures have the capability to be erected in the middle of existing cities, with a footprint not much larger than a conventional skyscraper. It may take a while for some of us to get used to living in a single structure with a population of 100,000 or more, and if you suffer from acrophobia, simply going for a walk might be a terrifying experience. The design known as the Endless Skyscraper might be of tremendous benefit to future generations. Since the advent of the internet, privacy concerns have grown exponentially. The web makes identity theft far easier than it ever was in the past, and the proliferation of smart appliances such as TVs and refrigerators have also led us to concerns over just how smart these devices are, and whether they can essentially be used to spy on you in your own home in order to collect data for advertisers. But just as George Orwell predicted in his seminal anti-authoritarian work 1984, the future may see privacy become a thing of the past, and we may be all too willing to give it up. We've seen in recent years that many governments are keen to exploit security concerns, such as the threat of terrorism, in order to attempt to strip civil liberties and institute mass surveillance to a degree which we've never seen before. If we continue in this vein and allow xenophobia and paranoia to become the norm, it's easy to envision a future in which Big Brother is actually watching us all the time, even within the confines of our own homes. But he won't need a two-way TV screen. Scientists are currently working on so-called smart dust, microscopic particles which could work together to monitor any environment at any time, with nobody being the wiser. We've seen how technology run amok could lead to dire scenarios for humanity, but any scientist worth their salt knows that perhaps the single biggest threat facing humanity in the future is ongoing man-made climate change. The world's population is only expected to increase, and the effects of climate change will stress this increasing population in a number of ways. First, most of us will be forced to relocate to cities and inland areas, as coastal regions will be rendered completely uninhabitable by rising ocean levels. As temperatures rise worldwide, the heat will place a severe strain on labor and agriculture, meaning that there will be less food and energy to go around. We may not have yet reached the tipping point at which climate change will become irreversible, but unless we form a serious commitment to renewable energy, we will very soon, and the world will become a much different place. The Athabasca Glacier in Canada is one of the largest in the world, the largest of 6 ice sheets that form part of the Columbia Icefield in Jasper National Park. Every year it receives up to 7 feet of snowfall, and every year hotter summers and longer fall seasons cause the glacier to lose up to 5 meters of ice. This may not seem like much, but over years it adds up to a level of shrinkage practically unprecedented in modern history. In 1994, the glacier was estimated to stretch over about 325 square kilometers. Nearly a quarter century later, it stands at about 220, having lost almost a third of its ice. We can expect many more such shrinkages to take place, leading to greatly increased runoff and rising water levels, which ironically won't keep water from becoming our planet's most valuable and scarce resource. The changing climate means that some areas will begin to experience severe flooding, as we've already seen with some of the larger hurricanes over the past several years, and others entering periods of severe drought like the one California recently endured. On top of this, rising water levels don't necessarily mean more potable water. Quite the opposite, as increasing populations in areas lacking modern sanitation techniques will lead to a marked increase in water pollution. The World Wildlife Fund weighed in on this issue with a terrifying estimate. By 2025, 2/3 of the world's population could be facing water shortages, and the accompanying strain on ecosystems around the world will only have the effect of worsening the problem. But the damage we're doing to the environment is multifaceted, and a shortage of water might not even be our most pressing issue. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development recently released an analysis which should give all of us pause. It looks ahead to the environmental issues we'll be facing in the year 2050 if we don't change our current course away from fossil fuels and toward renewable energy, and their conclusions are sobering, to put it mildly. The study predicts extremely disruptive climate change, continued loss of biodiversity, and severe freshwater shortages, but it says these will pale in comparison to the struggle we'll face with air pollution. Under our current policies, air pollution is predicted to become the single biggest cause of premature mortality by 2050, owing to an increased and more highly concentrated population along with runaway emissions. We're making the very environment which sustains us toxic to ourselves, and if the possibility of the air that you breathe becoming lethal within a few decades isn't dramatic enough, consider that Mother Nature will ensure that many of us won't make it that long. For the plainest evidence of the effects of climate change, look no further than the increasingly powerful hurricanes which have devastated the world over the last decade or so. They are a direct result of the changing climate, and as temperatures continue to rise, they'll only get more severe, entering into a new category of super hurricanes, the likes of which the world has never seen before. Gulf Coast areas of the US in which some residents were able to ride out severe storms in years past will be permanently abandoned. New Orleans, Houston, and many other major cities in this region will be destroyed. Hurricanes may push further inland than they ever have before, and their sheer destructive force will rival that of any weapon of war ever conceived. In fact, these killer storms will likely dwarf any casualties of terrestrial warfare by this time, because wars may have very well moved on to the final frontier. Wars of the future are likely to involve space to at least as large a degree as they involve the Earth. Consider that technically nobody has ownership over the Moon, which is why many governments are keen on the idea of establishing military bases there, from which offenses against other lunar bases or terrestrial targets could be plotted and launched. Of course, there's also the possibility of first contact with an alien civilization, which could give space stations and moon bases a key role in our planet's defense. But a more likely doomsday scenario would simply be we humans continuing to fight amongst ourselves and disregarding the effects of our conflicts and exploitation of the environment until such time arrives as there are no humans left to fight and nothing left to fight over.